I've not got a lot of time left, so I'll just briefly introduce themes. As I mentioned, these are issues that are cross-cutting and are pertinent wherever your site is located or whatever type of site. Earlier on, I presented a route map to help him to define the roles and responsibilities at a particular site. Well, this theme document on legislative and regulatory context provides an awful lot of detail on that. So if you want more of an area that you're not currently familiar with, that's a great place to dip in and out of. We also have some advice provided on funding sources, approval mechanisms that you'll need to consider, and don't forget, even if you're doing intrusive ground investigations, you'll probably need some form of approval, let alone building your scheme. And here, linking into the earlier question at the end of the first session, here is where we've brought in the document on stakeholders and their engagement. Originally it was called consultation, but then we consulted and apparently the name changed. So that's one of the limitations of consultation. You need to be prepared to change in response. I've just got one final slide, and that's on funding issues. I'm afraid I can't stand here and say I've got the answer for you, or I've got a pot of money even. But what I can do is highlight some of the principal elements. And really they are linked very strongly to the roles and responsibilities that I described earlier. So for example, if the erosion or release of material is arising from a permitted landfill site, then in most cases, or many cases, and of course there are always exceptions, but in many cases, if that's due to the actions or inactions of the operator, then that operator would be liable for funding the remediation. Similarly, if the site's designated as contaminated land and you can find who the polluter or the landowner is, then they become liable under the polluter pays principle for funding any remediation measures. Ideally, we were talking about partnership working and engagement earlier. Ideally, you would like that to be under voluntary measures, because I think that gives a better solution to everyone, not only the parties involved, but the wider community as well. But if necessary, at times, enforcement is also required. And going beyond that into the other areas of site categorization, these non-determined areas of land contamination, there are various public funding sources. They do include flood and coastal erosion risk granting aid, but in the current climate, of course, there's a lot of pressure on that pot, and there's the need for partnership funding within that mechanism. Many of these other mechanisms as well do exist, but some of which are oversubscribed, so funding is most definitely a challenge. But you can look beyond public funding as well into various other sources, such as you see there on the right-hand side. And I was asked a question earlier about how you go about developing a business case. Well, also in answering that, I also link into some of these sources of funding. If you're able to tap into some of these, you've got to be quite creative, to be honest, about your business case. You can't only rely on damages to property and so on. You've got to think about some of the wider implications caused by the release of the material, so the environmental damage, the potential for loss of life or effects on human health. So be creative and innovative, but also be realistic about the type of business case you're developing. And with that, I wish you every success in finding funding for your schemes. Okay, thank you.